today's episode, I'm joined by the incredible Philippa Forrester. You might know Philippa as a TV and radio presenter, a producer, and of course an author who graced her screens hosting things like Tomorrow's World, Robot Wars, Crufts. But she's also an author with a powerful voice. And her latest book, Wild Woman, is a raw and honest account of her experiences in Wyoming and so many different cultures, and the stories are told throughout. So in this episode, we're going to talk about her journey and moving her life from the UK to Wyoming, her deep connection with nature, and how she found clarity and strength during one of the most transformative periods of her time. It's a conversation about change, resilience, and embracing the wild woman within us all. Let's dive in. So Philippa, I am proper excited to be speaking to you today. I know we met at an event earlier, 2024, a tech event, but we actually chimed on menopause in that particular event. You came in to speak and you spoke about your book, which we'll talk about in a second. But I vaguely recall that I forgot something and then had a mini rant about menopause, and we ended up talking about that. And I'm finding a lot more women that are kind of my age. It's like that little secret nod that you give, and all of a sudden we're connected on a whole other level. So I'm really, really excited to have you on this. Also, you were the queen of like the best bob. I remember in the 90s, you used to have this like rocking bob. And myself and my sister used to have bobbed hair. I could never turn it in like yours. Never.
Yeah, but I don't
Things
forget,
you remember, isn't that?
you would have seen me on telly where I would have had a makeup artist.
True.
And she was
Fair point, actually. Yeah.
always been terrible.
I'd always get the one that would go in on one side and then go out on the other. You'd never get it to go like on both sides.
But then when you've got someone in the studio, I mean, it only would happen in the studio, but when you've got someone in the studio following you around, making sure that other side turns in as well, right? You're okay.
Well, that has removed a big, massive chunk of my 1990s trauma immediately. Thank you.
There you go. For me, this side would go out. This side goes in
Yeah,
you.
so did
So
that.
it just does it on its own. But this side will help if it's at that length.
It must
But I've been
naturally like.
seriously thinking, shall I chop some off? Shall I chop some off? And get back to a bit of a bob.
I can't really advise on that one. I used to have hair probably around about your length, and then I cut it all off. I used charity as the reason. A friend of mine was sick, and I was raising money for a cancer charity. But also, I was dyeing my hair every 10 days nearly because I was really dark-haired when I was younger. So I was still dyeing it dark, which meant that the super grey roots were really obvious really quickly, and I was so over it. So it was quite liberating to have. I have a picture on my wall still of me like completely like slap head bald after it. Liberating and cold because I did it in December. Why December?
Was it? Did it make a big difference to how cold you were?
Oh my God. Immediately, yes. But then I also, like 2 days later, I had to get on a plane and go to Norway, which was probably not the best thing to do when you've just lost all of the heat from your hair. Like,
Yeah.
But it grows so much, it feels like it grows so much faster. So I got over it pretty quickly and then learned I was in perimenopause. So I go outside now and people think I'm mad because I'm in a t-shirt and jeans and everyone else is wearing a winter jacket. And I'm like, nope, I'm not even ready for a fleece yet. I'm too hot all the time. That's funny. But first world problems, I guess. But I have to say, since I cut it super, super short, best move I ever made. Like, I don't know how I ever stood up with long hair for so long. All I ever did was tie it back anyway.
Well, see, I like
Nobody
it
ever
because
saw it.
it's easy and long, I find.
Yes.
I think it's either you go none or you go long.
Yeah, or long. All that in between is too much maintenance. Like, I hear you. I hear you.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I'm going to make a very, very like serious attempt to stay on target here, but I know we're going to wander around. I think it's the nature of it, and I'm happy to do that. But what I want to talk about first, actually, before we even get into the book, is I think one of the most interesting parts of it is getting you to the point at which you wrote the book, I suppose. Like, I mean, I know you from TV. I know you from, I was actually looking back through your catalogue of things that you've done. I think I've watched every single one of them. It wasn't that I had a themed interest at one point. It seems that I was into
Well, I was
all of
going
the
to say
same
that's quite
things.
some feat, because at one point I was doing Crafts, Tomorrow's World, The Eclipse. These were just this mad. And somebody said to me, "Oh, my whole family watches you because my son watches Robot Wars, my husband watches Tomorrow's World with me, and then my daughter and I like watching. We've all watched you this week." And I thought, "Gosh, it's quite mad, actually. Huge portfolio."
It is, but what you did it didn't stick to any particular theme. Like, there was definitely an embracing of like an inner nerd in a lot of the things that you
Sure.
did, and it would have been unusual to see a woman at the forefront of those things. Which for me, especially with things like Tomorrow's World and Robot Wars, it was almost like we had permission then to enjoy it because it's that visibility. Once you see women involved in it, and you're like, okay, so that's also for me too. Did it feel that way at the time when you were doing it?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it was one of those weird things where, for me, the common link is people, and I'm interested in lots of things. So once you put those two together, I literally, I could have been doing songs of praise and I would have still been really enthralled because I'm interested in people.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who they are. So it didn't matter to me that these were nerdy people making robots. I was fascinated by their passion and their commitment and their creativity. So
Yes.
for me, that was the link through everything always. And there was quite some interesting, oh, she's a bit nerdy, because in those days, it was, what was that men's magazine? FHM? Was it FHM?
Oh, yes.
It was that kind of ladette culture, but not nerdy at all. I was no Zoe
Yeah.
Ball, was no Sarah Cox. I wasn't those kind of sexy women out there. I was very different. And so I did sometimes think, is there something wrong with me? Because I wasn't that person. Um, but at the end of the day, you can only be you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I always found you very relatable, and I think that helps too. 'Cause sometimes, I mean, I'm of the generation, at least on Irish TV, there was what we used to call RTE Irish, or I even think they pronounced the R as RTE Irish,
Mhm.
but it was like BBC British, that there was only one accent that you heard, um, and then there was only one background, and it didn't matter who you were, you weren't going to relate to the people that were there, but but I think that changed, certainly in the 90s, it changed a lot significantly. And as somebody actually, I neutralised my accent quite a bit. I'm a Wexfordian, and the Wexford accent is very much like, all right, lads, how you doing? So it's like really nasal and really twangy. But I ended up working with people all over the world, and they can't understand that. So,
Yeah.
but I understand how suddenly things became much more accessible when you're seeing all these different people. And you were one of the more relatable ones, I think. Maybe it's because you mixed up so much of what you did. And I'm an
Yeah.
ADHDer, so that might explain why I watched all of them. Crufts used to fascinate me. We never even had pets when we were younger, but I used to always dream that one day I would get up and in the little porch that was on our house, there would be like those little cage thingies full of puppies. Now I have a dog,
I used
and I
to
really
have those constantly spent journeys looking outside the car at the motorway, thinking somebody must have done a kitten or a puppy along the motorway for me to rescue. I was really being little.
it's mad, isn't it? Now that you're an adult, you're the one that's having to pick up. So let's go. Like Wild Women, I know you talked about it when I saw you at that event, and I've since read it, or like I say, I audibled it because I'm a devil for reading and then putting it down and forgetting about it. That's definitely just my attention span. But what I love the most, I loved a lot of things about the book. I love that you were the voice on the audible, and I think my favorite people in the books were those female rangers. Awesome. But I love the intertwining of your story in between all of the stories of those women too. And so this book shares your journey and the other women's journey. And when you moved and lived in Wyoming, like what made you think to write the book? I guess in the first place, where did the idea come from and what led to
Well, weirdly, it was meant to be a book about bears. Then it was a book
it?
about, and I kind of drilled down to, well, what is it that I'm finding fascinating about bears? And it came out as a double pronged, really, from the experience of writing. So I wrote On the Trail of Wolves while I was in Wyoming, all about the issues surrounding wolves. Again, it's a people book, really. It's, even if you're not interested in wolves, it's about the people, because it's the people that have got the issues, not the wolves. Just get on with being wolves. But people all around them have got an opinion about wolves, and they're very Marmite, and that also then really represents, it's a mirror of, the kind of polarization of right and left, particularly in America. So are you a hunter? Do you have guns? Do you think it's your right to kill wolves? Do you, blah, blah, blah. So it was fascinating to me. And again, it was, if you boil it down, it's people issues. Wolves I love, and wolves are extraordinary. And of course, they're massive, but you learn a lot about wolves. But alongside all of that, living in Wyoming, you develop a relationship with fear, and a very primal kind of fear, because you're living in a place where the weather really can take over. I mean, we've just had a storm here, but we have 2 inches of snow. Well, a storm here that was serious, but we've had 2 inches of snow in the past, and the whole place shuts down. And you say, what on earth? And there's a lot of fear mongering, honestly. Make sure that you drink lots of hot drinks. And I'm like, people are freezing to death here. Whereas in Wyoming, it can be -40, and the snow is up beyond the kitchen window. You can't see out. You definitely can't get out. But added to which, then, if you do get out, not so much in the snow because they'll be asleep, but there's grizzly bears wandering around, and moose, and things that actually can cause you death. So we're not used to living with
that.
we're not used to living with predators on this landscape, and it's how we evolved to live. So I was a bit pathetic and I'm not generally pathetic, but even I was a bit pathetic when we moved. I was like, oh, snow, oh, that's, oh, Bruce, but you get to have a relationship with fear. You get to have an inner voice that goes, oh, for God's sake, right, assess the risks realistically, right? And how do you deal with those risks? Is it too risky, honestly, or is it not? I remember one day we turned up to go and check a camera trap. We got out of the car and there was a kind of a path where we were going to go up the mountain. And so we were still at the base of it where it was a bit wet. And it was spring. We looked in the mud just down below, just in front of the car, and there was a massive grizzly bear print. And the water was still oozing into it. So, honest assessment,
No way.
that's new. That's very new. That's within the last hour. That's big. It's spring. They've got up. They're known to be really cranky when they've just woken up. And if they're a mum, they've got and they might have brand new cubs that they've just given birth to in the den. They're just bringing them out for the first time. They're super protective. So they're gnarly because they're angry. They might have new cubs. This is a big one. And this is very close to us now. So we got back in the car.
Yes.
Because assess the risk.
I'm just thinking, tell me we didn't keep going.
We didn't go up there, which, was frustrating because we had work to do, but we didn't go up there. And you get good at doing that. You get good at going, what's your imagination and what's actually a real risk that you really need to pay attention to and stop being silly. And that started to really fascinate me because I kept saying to myself, but we are creatures who evolved to live in the wilderness. We didn't evolve to live what we did. Eventually, of course, we now live in super protection. We protect ourselves with layers of everything from technology to bricks to everything. But we didn't. We lived out there. And what have we lost? And what did that relationship with fear mean to us? I began to be quite fascinated by that. So bears and wilderness were going to go together, I think, into that next. But coming back, we weren't expecting to come back. And so I felt like I could have eked out a book about bears. but I wasn't there anymore. So it didn't feel right at that point to write that book without me being there. And then, of course, we were in lockdown. So everything had changed. Alongside that, a cowboy who we lived next door to for a time him and I had talked about for a long time one evening. His wife was a cowgirl and they were older now and retired. But I was like, so can tell me about cowgirls. Really, did they, really? Were cowgirls a real thing? And he was predicting, yes, they absolutely were. And we needed, he said, because we could send them out into thousands of cattle and they would sort out really quickly anyone that was having problems, any illness, calves that were not bonding with their mums properly or were lost. Much quicker, he said, much quicker than we could. He said they brought something different to the job than we did.
Yeah.
We're a lot
Intuition.
brute force. He said they weren't weak either. They were really strong. They could definitely cope with that life. But at the same time, they brought a different set of sensitivities and skills, which were valuable, which we needed. That was the seed right there for Wild Women. So when I came back and I was thinking, what do we do here? Because, it was already commissioned as a book. And I bought back with me this amazing book. In fact, what you can't really see the print there is of a woman in the wilderness. What she's doing is she's painting her facts, and behind her here are bears, and here's her dog, and she's painting, and she's a cowgirl. So there's this wonderful artist.
I was going to say, she must be local then.
There's this wonderful artist with these amazing, amazing illustrations of women in the wilderness. But they always have some element of domestic as well. And they're bright and colourful and joyous and out there. And I happened to glance at that and I thought, that's what this is. I was getting proper writer's block. And I glanced at that and I thought, the penny dropped. That's what it is. I'd already interviewed 3 men for the book. And I thought, no, that's what it is. It isn't about men. It's about women. And no one's done a deep dive into what that is. And all of Ken's words came flooding back. So I emailed my publisher quickly and said, right, what do you think? We had a chat and she loved it, to her credit. So she's a great editor. And she said, yeah, absolutely, go for it. So that was it.
I think from your publisher's perspective as well, it makes a difference when you're writing something that I'm sure you can write, because you've, which I was surprised to find, you have you've studied, haven't you? What is it called? Ecology, is it?
Yeah. So
all of that, like.
Yeah, I got my second degree was environmental conservation, and that was
environmental conservation.
What I was doing in the evenings. Yeah. 4 years.
So I'm sure, like you say, you could do the book about bears, and it would be a wonderful book. But there's something different about when somebody
about bears. Yeah.
But the feels that come with this one are a whole other vibe, and you can tell that you're passionate about the people that you're speaking to. But it's like a whole different level. It's not just facts. Like it speaks differently, I think, in that way.
And
you talk about
exploration.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about lots of different experiences within the book. And like, I know my favorite was the female rangers, but what was your favorite, or are you allowed to have favorites?
It's really hard because you have to write in that way. You have to have an attachment to all of the people that are in there for a reason. It wasn't just a random kind of plucking people out of nowhere. There was always a connection anyway. So my relationship with this place, which you'll know is in the book so much, was something that I explored alongside, because I felt very much like you can't just expect people to share their soul with you if you're not going to do a bit of that too. And I needed to explore, okay, what is, if you're not out there, what is your relationship with nature? What is our relationship with the wild? And that whole area of science of proving now what we already knew, that nature is so beneficial to us. So how do we access that if we don't have Yellowstone on our doorstep? So I was exploring all of those things at the same time. I think they see, as I said, there are so many attachments in that book. Catching up with Liza was amazing from and that Nigerian primate project, because I've been young when I went there, volunteering there, and that had been a real moment for me of just how tough it was in the field, just understanding, and again, mainly because of humans, understanding what a fledgling conservation project was having to deal with. And writing about Jacob, particularly that old chimpanzee and his story. That was a moment that I think is frozen in my mind like a photo, meeting him in his prison as it was then, and knowing that he did get to experience some sort of freedom and kindness from humans was an amazing story. His story was really humbling to me, because what the cruelty that humans can inflict, and yet the kindness that he would give back. It just said so much about not just our, we like to think that humans are somehow superior, but we're not.
Oh God, not even sort of. And I think like that's, even as you described that, that's the thing. I will admit that when I was starting the book first, I thought, I don't know a whole lot about the, nature within the rest of the world. Obviously, I will know like UK and Irish nature is pretty samey. We come across it every day. And I thought, am I going to be super intimidated now because she knows all of this stuff, and it's going to be a lot of things that I don't understand or don't mean something to me. And it wasn't at all. Like, I came away from it feeling like I was there and like I was connected to those characters, because especially when you're talking about the women, whatever environment all of them were in, there's this kind of common thread of, like I said to you before we had even started recording, like this, it fed the soul. Like there's this, I can't even think of what the word is for this common thread, but I think every woman has it or is capable of it. And when you come across it in another woman, it feeds it like a little flame and gives you the opportunity to think that I could probably do that, or my equivalent of that. And that for me was the bit, is like it threaded through the whole story, and especially as it skipped back to your story and then went back to theirs and then went back to your story. And like I also said beforehand that I was glued to it until it was finished, much to my husband's annoyance, because I did nothing around the house while I was listening to it. I was like, I'm not finished. But it stuck like that, where, I'll admit in the beginning I was going, am I not going to get this? Because I don't, I'm not familiar with, the conservation of nature really in places where I haven't seen those animals. Do you know what I mean? But it didn't, it was so, it was so relatable. Even things that I didn't possibly think I could relate to. It was so relatable, and you threaded it so well, like, because of the human. Like you say, the human is there all the way through.
To take you to them. My job was to take you to those places and show you those things.
Yeah.
I think that's very much our job as a writer. Yeah.
It was wonderful. And then, do you think that your relationship with the natural world as such has changed through the exercise of making this book?
I think I've got more understanding of it, because again, when I'm writing something, I want to learn. Whether it's a children's book or whether it's, something like Wild Woman, I wanted to learn too. So there was for me, a lovely experience of deep diving into the science. And there's, you'll have noticed there's a lot of that through the book. Okay, why is this making me feel good? Yeah. Why is this making me feel good to have my hands in the soil? And we now know there are proper scientific reasons for it. Listen to the dog in the background. The thing is, Doodle, you don't actually need to make yourself a bed in the rug. You don't. It's just a rug. You don't need to do
It's what they do. He's having his moment.
Kind of primitive bed that he's got to make a rug. Shall I do dogs this? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Mine does the same. Mine pulls every blanket and jumper that he can find and puts it over him, and then he wonders why people stand on him because they don't realize that he's buried underneath all of these things. Like he's a dash. He's only a little teeny tiny thing, but watching him throwing them in the air so that they land on top of him and he can be buried in it is just entertainment in itself. Like,
Yeah.
weird.
They
It's
want
so
to be
weird.
warm. They feel the
But
cold.
yeah, this is not his time of year at all. Like, he goes,
Yeah.
I want to go out. I want to go out. And I open the front door and he goes, ew, it's cold. He goes back in again. Like, he doesn't want to go out at all. Every day. We do the ritual every single day.
Yeah.
But when we were at the event, one of the things, like, say, I was on a panel and I had a little rant and a ramble about menopause, because I think at that particular time for me, I wasn't that long diagnosed with ADHD, which was diagnosed as a result of perimenopause kicking in and all of my ADHD
right?
symptoms. Yes, exactly. They just went through the roof, and then everything was just out of control. And I thought I was losing my mind. And I can't recall exactly what I said, but I do remember having a mini rant about how it's just unfair and everybody needs to know about all the different signs and things. Because I'm 45 now, my family, they're usually around 37, 38, start perimenopause. But we knew about hot flushes. We knew about period stopping, which haven't. So that's not even you don't even get that win straight off the bat. And that was about it. Like, we didn't know about the 400 million other things that happen that make you think you're actually losing your mind before somebody goes, oh, any chance that's perimenopause? I'm not bitter or anything. But what do you... Yeah, it's just, especially if it starts early, because no one will listen to you.
No one would talk about it. No one used to talk about miscarriage either. No one would talk about that.
Actually, it was like, it's a dirty word, as if you could control it.
Yeah, right? And the more that people can talk about it, the more that people, when they suffer from it, realize, okay, this is not as scary and big as I think. It's actually, a bit possibly part of the process sometimes. So,
Yeah,
miscarriage is a similar scenario, I think. And then, menopause, I was exactly the same. I knew about hot flushes. In fact, I didn't really click. So I started shortly after my third. Now I know, looking back, if not before, because it took a little while to get him going.
yeah.
And I can remember vividly him being quite small. In fact, he was so small. You know, when they're so small that their car seat is still facing backwards.
Yeah.
Then the baby.
Then, yeah.
That's how small he was.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, what's that, 3 months, 6 months? I can't remember when they moved car seats.
It's up to about 6 or 8 months, like, yeah.
And I was driving to school to get the boys and had my first hot flush. And I had no idea what it was. And I thought, oh, must be getting a temperature and coming down with something. And for years, I didn't put it together at all. So at that point, I'd obviously been kicked in early. So I was 36 then. As I said, in hindsight now, talking with an OBGYN in the US, it's like Grey's Anatomy over there. She'd given the history of then trying to conceive and all the rest of it. She said, I suspect you were in your early 30s. You were already in. And I had no idea, absolutely no idea, until my late 40s, when a doctor in America said, what's going on with your hormones? And I went, I don't know. And she said, well, you shouldn't be having these symptoms. Let me test your hormones. And then, tests came back, and as I wrote about in the book, there were none. The relief because I knew I wasn't right. My head didn't work properly. I was constantly weeping, and I kept saying something's not right with me. But I didn't know what it was until the facts and the figures speak for themselves. Then that's what's also so lovely. You get those numbers on a piece of paper. This isn't someone telling you you're imagining it. It's not someone telling you, oh, you're just stressed. It's not someone telling you you need to rest more, or eat more, or exercise more, or look after yourself better, or you've got 3 kids and no wonder you're stressed. It's none of those things, because you're still going, this still isn't me. Yeah. So it was,
you could have done anything to prevent it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
then you had 10 years of that. Like, you 10 years of not knowing and wondering where you're losing your mind. Like, I think even people who have 1 year of that, it's too long to feel that way. But 10 years, like I had maybe 5 before somebody went, is that it? And when I think about the 5 years that I legit thought that I was getting early onset dementia, that I was getting run down, I was getting fevers all the time. Duh. When I look at it now, it's just kind of funny. But all of the things that I thought were wrong with me, including like depression as well, because while a lot of the symptoms look like that, and then also you will get depressed because you can't figure out what's wrong with you. So for me, 5 years was torture, but 10 years, I can't imagine how that must have felt.
I was also very weepy, so I would cry a lot. Some days I would find myself crying and think, and not actually crying about anything. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah, just crying.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And then I think, well, maybe I'm just doing some kind of weird stress release, or it's some kind of, my dad had died from vascular dementia. So maybe it's something, which is, as we know, grief is a little bit more complicated when it's a slower death that you're anticipating. It almost comes in stages. Maybe it's some kind of delayed grief I'm going through. What is this mysterious crying? And I can remember my husband phoning in, and I was in floods of tears. And he's like, "What's wrong with you? What's happened?" And I went, "Nothing. That's my point. I don't know. Nothing's wrong with me." And he's like, "Well, you don't just cry for no reason." I went, "No, I literally am. I'm having a good old cry.
Yeah.
For no reason. My life is lovely. There's nothing wrong. You know, everything's as it should be." Bizarre. It is bizarre.
Yes.
Because it's like, right. We did all our periods and all of that. You know, had to cope with that as teenage girls. Had to do all of that. Then we gave birth and had pregnancy. Thank you very much. What, this isn't the end? Actually, this is even worse, and no one warned us.
No, exactly. And at least after pregnancy, you got to take a baby home. There was a reward at the end of it. I remember finding myself several times where I would be halfway through a sentence and all I could hear is just the tumbleweeds. I'd be like, never mind what I was going to say, but what I was even talking about. And it became so common that I had just become a leader in work, and I had 2 new people on my team, that they always used to finish my sentences, and they just thought that's how I was. They couldn't get over it when I went on HRT and then I was diagnosed with ADHD. I went on meds for those as well. All of a sudden, I could function like a regular human being. But I know that the UK is one of the best places for talking about it openly, which is wonderful. We're getting there on the Irish side, but I know in Ireland, like you can't get HRT until you're over 45 years of age, which means 46. Well, they don't just say 46, they say over 45. So I went to my doctor with the full fight in me because I was approaching him at 42. So I was lucky. I went to, it's a married couple that are GPs in where I'm at, and she specialised in menopause. But there's only one real menopause specialist in the country. So in order for her to be able to prescribe HR to me, she had to do all of the tests. She had to know exactly what she needed, which she did because she'd specialised in it. And then she had to send it to this one specialist in the country to get permission, basically, to give me the HRT patch 3 years early. And now I'm one of 4 girls. My older sister went to a different GP and she was flat out refused until she turned 46, which she's 47 now, I think, so she's finally got it. My younger sister is 2 years younger than me, went to her GP, and her GP, she in ahead of it. So she was like, I'm anticipating this coming because I'm always 2 years behind this sister. She's 2 years younger than me. And her GP just said, sure, when you're ready, just let me know. I'll give it to you. And now I have a younger sister who is 35 now, and she's looking like she's already starting and stuff, and we're all ready for the fight for her. So it's really, really inconsistent how the treatment is. And like say, to gatekeep it from someone, in my case, I was the breadwinner. I did a lot of public speaking. I needed to not look like an idiot in my day-to-day work or on stage. I needed to not forget. And that was what won my argument. Purely that, not just as a woman, I needed to function, but because I was the breadwinner, was what won my argument. And there's like looking at my sister, who is a single person, who's a solicitor, kind of have to have your crap together. And she was still refused it until she was 46, which is just
that's just
insane.
Yeah, absolutely. How when it was, you know, and that still frustrates me. I think there are many men embracing it, open, saying, okay,
Yes.
let me find out more. Let me be supportive. How can I help? There are many, many men doing that, and that's fantastic. There are still men. I've heard of someone recently say to a woman, if I hear anyone else moan on about the menopause, I think I'm going to vomit. And I thought, yeah, you are Victorian, frankly, in your
Yes.
thinking.
Funny enough,
And
it's going to happen to
and
every
stick
woman at some stage.
enough.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But they're
Like,
the ones, like, they're the
yeah.
ones who think that they're going to date 23-year-olds for the rest of their life.
Yeah,
You know, it's
yeah,
just,
yeah,
yeah.
I know. But equally, we slowly the tide is turning, you know.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's
They
partly
rub me
because, oh, stop. Yeah. But the generation now that is hitting it is talking about it. And it's talking about every single symptom. Like, I go into my younger sister every weekend and I'm like, here's this week's new menopause symptom. And it's like feeling like there's spiders on your skin, which she's afraid of spiders. And she's like, what? I said, yeah, it's feeling like something that's crawling on you sometimes. And she's like, I'll take everything else. She goes, but I'm, what? Not that one. But it's not, I mean, you can find it. You can Google these things now. But like, say, when my mother told me about it, all I remember is I was a teenager. So I wasn't that long into periods, and I thought my mother knew nothing about anything anyway, so I wasn't really listening to her. But she told me about hot flashes and period stopping, and that was all of it. And I remember that we hated each other throughout that time. It's like an especially cruel twist when mothers go through it, when their children go through their teens. Like, who planned that? Had to be a man. But it's especially cruel doing that because you have no patience for each other anyway. Now my boys, like you, I have 3 boys here at home. One's an adult, he's out of the house. But whether they like it or not, they've had to learn all about everything that affects women whatsoever, to the brutal stages of which, like, I'm standing angry in the kitchen, the period is due, and I'm like, if you're not coming near me with chocolate, fuck off. Basically, and I'll send them on their way. I'm like, I've explained it to them and they're very good about it. They'll talk quite openly, but now they're hearing all the menopause stuff too. And I'm like, you need to know this because if you're partnering with a woman and you're going to get to that stage of your life and you want to continue to partner with that woman, you need to understand, because I think a lot of men are getting a slap in the face because this isn't the woman that they married. Shockingly enough, we get
Yes.
older, but not just because of how we look. Everything, the personality goes through so many shifts and changes, as does theirs, but
How do they cope with, they need support too. And not just that. And I do remember, in fact, that event that we met at was a Women in Leadership event for time.
yeah,
That guy who organised that is fantastic. He's really motivated and he understands, look at my workforce. Look at a valued part of my
yes,
workforce.
that's
So
right.
I need to know about it, not just from a personal point of view, but from a professional point of view too. How do I support these women through this so that they can still do their good work, so they can still show up as their best self? And he's right. We all need.
I was laughing recently because it must be a couple of months ago. I was at an event with there was a whole bunch of tech leaders, but I was at a dinner table and there was these 2 tech leaders sitting opposite me, and they're probably in their late 40s, early 50s, these 2 guys. And because I was the only woman at the table, of course, we're talking about women in the field. And they were saying, we can get them in, we're getting them in at the early stages. And then they, some of them will have babies and they'll come back and we'll get them. He said, but once they're kind of over 35, he said, they start to drop off, they start to disappear. And I was legit at that moment sitting at the table fanning myself, going, I wonder why that is. They were still the 2 of them, they're both married, 2 women. They were still looking at me really blankly, kind of going, what do you mean? Like, are you for real? So I ended up having a menopause talk with 2 complete strangers at the table, was having a hot flash and going, this is why, like, if I have to experience this and you don't understand what I'm experiencing and how utterly uncomfortable it is and how I feel like it's turning me into an idiot. Like, I'm an intelligent person who's learned a lot of things over the years and is more than capable of doing my job and sometimes doing your job. But if this is going to make me look like I can't, then for my own sake of self and shame, I would consider hiding.
Yeah.
Because I want to be remembered as somebody who did have her crap together.
Yeah. I remember saying to the doctor,
So
remember vividly saying, I used to go on live television every single day of my life and then go home and do other stuff as well. I had 10 people
Yeah.
sometimes I could hear in my ear while I'm doing an interview. You know, I'd get up in the morning, I'd get dressed, I'd go into makeup, and I'd go on telly. That's what I did every single day. I said, I
Yeah.
couldn't even dream of doing that now. I'd be too frightened that my brain wasn't going to work fast enough. What's
Yeah.
happening to me? I remember saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's
they just
terrifying.
can't underestimate it because it's frightening.
I think I was lucky in the sense recently, it's a terrible way to be lucky, but my husband I'm laughing because you'll understand in a minute why I'm laughing. My husband, they say that during COVID, a lot of people that got COVID, they have these like dormant disorders and stuff that were triggered by it. But in his case, it was a B12 deficiency. I don't even know exactly how that first bit worked. But anyway, he has a B12 deficiency, but it takes about 2 years for all your stores to disappear before you finally notice that you've got it. At which point, all of your cognitive abilities are pretty shocking. And I wouldn't, with the boys in the house, we wouldn't actually sit down to do stuff together that often. We'll talk at each other about such a body's here, they have to go there, you know, the usual drill of things. But I remember sitting down with him, he was due to go on holiday. He had his bloods done and they rang him and said, your B12 is low, come in, we need to give you a jab. And he was like, I'm going away for a few days, I'll come and do the jab afterwards. And they were like, no, we kind of need to do it now. But I sat down with him to check into his flight and I was telling him, you know, click on this, scroll that. And there was like easy about 15-20 second delay between what I told him to do and him going, huh? Every time. And I remember that moment and I remember thinking, has he got dementia? Like, this is really bad, because I hadn't actually had any conversation with him prior to it and I really learned how bad it was. But I think for me, him having that moment, like he's on his regular B12 jabs now and he's doing grand, but him having felt like that and me saying to him, that's what the closest I could come to with regards how it felt when the, you know, menopause kicked in for me and it wasn't under control. I think I was lucky enough to have somebody who could kind of at some level relate to it. Nowhere near the same thing, like, but certainly the cognitive side of it, which was, I don't think he realized how scary it was for him until he felt better. And then he realized how bad he was, if you know what I mean. Whereas same in my case, I was at the time really confused and couldn't make sense of it. And then when I felt better, realized exactly how bad it was. And even as a younger person, I'm thinking, when I'd have, whether I was a teenager or in my early 20s, coming across women that were in menopause, I'd have gone, sure, what does she know? It's daft. Didn't even finish a sentence. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like how judgy I was. But now I understand what it is. Defo. I know in my colleagues in the field would hardly talk about it at all. Like, we're more forthcoming over here. There's a
Yeah,
need to talk about
exactly.
it.
And
No,
they're trying to shift that, I think, as well. I think that
yeah,
is a shift there. But they are definitely behind us in talking about it. Medically, they're not, interestingly. Medically, they're way ahead
yeah,
in terms of their training and in terms of, because there's more finance for medical stuff
yes,
in the
of course.
States. But it's just getting that word out there to talk about it. I think that's still
Yeah,
slightly, but
absolutely.
yeah,
I
it's
don't
a
think I'll
big
ever,
deal. No, no. Um, And you do, I mean, again, just coming back to that book, you do then find yourself, once you're kind of through and you've got your treatment and all the rest of it, and you're suddenly aware, thinking, well, what's the point of it? And that's where I'd gotten to when I was writing the book. I was like, what was the point? What's the point of it? Pregnancy, we can see the point of. Periods, we can see the point
yeah,
of. What's the point of menopause? And that's what's quite interesting is then it's just us and a couple of species of whales that we know of that have menopause. And I kept saying to Liza, who's the primate lady, I kept saying to her, sure,
yeah,
Jim, they're not living long. Sure. And she went, no, there's no evidence. And she said, believe me, I looked. But they can't have any evidence with any other primate. But these two species, the orcas have it. And I think it's a fin
yeah.
whale. And with orcas, the theory is that the matriarch of a pod is who is followed. And she leads the
Mm,
way through all these different seasons, through, hardships and years where there's lots of food, years where there's not so much food. She'll take them to different places. Because she's lived the longest, she's got that knowledge. And so
Yeah.
the thought is, does menopause relieve you of the duties of, and the kind of the biological burden of reproduction to enable you to assist the younger generations, which would make sense. It just doesn't make sense of
Yeah.
why. So, why are we suffering?
True.
And I couldn't see any evidence that orcas have hot flushes. I think I did write that as well. Like, if you're an orca, do you still get hot
What about that look
flushes?
like underwater?
If so, and you're in the cold water, what's going on?
It's probably the best place in the entire world to be if you're having one, isn't it?
All of these things we have to laugh at. And I think that's, again, what I tried to get in the book, that kind of just sense of, okay, these are important subjects that we're discussing from conservation right through to menopause. However, we have to be able to laugh. And I think that's what women really are good at, is laughing together about challenges. I think that's one of the ways we can.
Absolutely. And even as you're talking about it, I know, like, I was thinking, sure, menopause would have been there long before all of the kind of cultural, societal structures that we have in place. But then, if you go back far enough, we would have all died before we hit menopause age. And in some ways, I'm going, is that a good thing? Or
And again, this is in the book that there's evidence to suggest maybe not. Maybe we didn't.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
It is interesting. And
Sure.
I know that we'll find out more.
Yes. It's getting, we're finding out things kind of faster and with more detail now, and it's fascinating to me. But I think that kind of, that, matriarchal thing that you speak of, even if you think, of the strong female characters, many of them are older and feistier. I don't know, any feist I think I have that I would have had when I was younger, I'm definitely leaning into it more the older that I'm getting. And I don't think it's just an experience thing. I think I just give less shits. I'm just like, part of it comes with being uncomfortable or going through those kind of things, like menopause anyway. So you just kind of go, why am I tolerating stuff that I don't want to tolerate? And I'll, fight harder for it or argue for it or not put up with something. And I think that gives you an opportunity to lean more into the truth of who you are or what you stand for then
I
from there,
think that there's a truth in the fact that being relieved of that biological burden, in the sense of that monthly cycle, and that are we reproducing this month or are we not reproducing this month? But being relieved of that makes you think slightly differently, and you're looking to a bigger meaning and purpose. And I think that's what's interesting about this stage of life. And so, yeah, for me, obviously that's conservation. It's obviously sustainability and those things that I lean into to give myself something bigger than me. Your
yeah,
family are more
yeah,
independent at this stage, and hopefully, all being well, are starting to move into their own lives. And that job is never done, but that job has eased in its daily pressures. And that gives us, I think, a
yes,
moment
for
of
sure.
time to reflect and think, okay, what can I do now for the greater good? And again, for me, that becomes about campaigning about sustainability, about conservation, about all of those things that I think that we really need to move on with our society, that we really need to focus on, and that have always mattered to me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the more women I know that are my age and older are, whatever they want to do, they want to have purpose in doing it. Like,
Yeah.
Even if it's their job, they don't just want to do the job anymore. It's the job isn't just serving the purpose of paying bills or raising families. They want to do something that means something. They want to do something that changes something. I hadn't really thought about it, but I'm trying to think of anyone that I know that's around my age that isn't like that. And I don't know, I can't think of any, which is good. But that does align to that for sure, that we're leaning into that.
Yeah,
Which is
the
great.
job becomes, okay, well, and also I think with the sustainability stuff, all of whatever our job is, now has to have a relationship with sustainability. We now have to think about the consequences at work,
Yes.
home, of our impact on the planet. And that, we're just building a new campaign now to help people with that, because I think there's often this sense of disempowerment, where we should feel really empowered. We should feel really like okay, we can lean into this and we can do this as, you know, as we go about our daily lives. We can make all these choices that make a difference. And I think that that
Yeah.
is really important, that we can start to empower people to make choices that matter and to think bigger picture, because we get so
Yes.
locked down. And I think that's one of the things that menopause does to us. We're locked down into trying to get through every single day. And once you've got your
Yes.
HRT, if that's your route forward, or I know some people are using yam, and some people are using natural remedies, and some, you
Yeah.
know.
Of course.
But once we've figured out, okay, what's our route through this, and got to the other side where we've relieved of all those symptoms, then there comes this amazing opportunity to think, how can we change the world, basically, and how can we do that
Yes. The
for
clarity
the
is
better?
there. Like, yeah,
And then it becomes quite exciting.
absolutely. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that. Not quite there, nearly there, but looking forward
And
to
this,
that.
I mean, for me,
So
there's the sustainability piece. There's no one and no area that it doesn't affect, you know,
true.
and I can go anywhere and everywhere, and that. So as I said, that's more of what I've been working on, that kind of stuff, and that kind of consultancy and rewilding and all of that stuff. And that I just laugh because it affects all of us. It will affect all of us, and we are affecting it. We have huge control and power if we choose to take it.
And it's another thing that there's not enough, I want to say accessible information about it. It's either talked about at a high level where you have to be a big corporate to make a difference, or it's recycling your bottles at home. But there's no sort of middle of the range kind of what it means outside of your home. There's bits of it, but you know what I mean? It's not readily available, that kind of information where those
Well,
decisions can have a knock
plan is
on.
to yeah. So
So
to bring that information and make it exciting to make the changes. Look at the difference we can make, you know. So to
yeah,
bring all of that information to one place, that's easy. It's not, you know, we're all tired and we're all living busy lives. So it's easily accessible, easily changeable, and quite nice to see the benefit, you know.
yeah, absolutely. I look
So that's,
forward to
yeah.
that.
So look out for that campaign because that'll be exciting.
Deadly. Will do. With that, well, I've got one more question for you. So with everything then that you've experienced from the TV shows of the past, and then, you know, writing this super personal book, what's next for you, and what message would you like to leave with anyone who's reading your book right now?
Well, as I said, we're working on this campaign. It's called A
Will you
Million
give the
Choices.
sustainability? Does it have a
Yeah,
name?
A Million Choices.
Are you allowed to tell us the name?
Yeah, A Million
Cool.
Choices. That's what it's called. And
Brilliant.
so we're working now on the website and on sponsorship and on that what we'll do is we'll have tons of discount codes for people as well. So we're working on relationships with those companies that do offer us genuine, whether it's a cleaning product or a beauty product or a whatever. So, you know, there's a certain amount of consumer power that we all have, but there's also huge amounts of behavior change that we can make. And I dig very deeply into that. And what inspires us to change, and what inspires us to lead that change as well. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but we will hopefully have that website launched in 25, early 25. We're hoping. We haven't got an exact date yet, but yeah, A
Yeah,
Million Choices campaign.
excellent. I love it. Looking forward to that. And when it's been launched, like you say, we need that. We need that everything in one place kind of
Yeah.
approach. Well, Philippa,
And
it's
it's
been an
followed
absolute
on.
joy.
I mean,
Oh yeah,
it's followed on naturally from the Conscious podcast that we did. It's an extension of that. So we'll bring back another series of Conscious podcast along with the Million Choices campaign. So yeah, it was a natural kind of flow through from doing that podcast, which was about, you know, all these people with different approaches on how to make the world better around sustainability, around conservation, and talking to them and that kind of everyday hero feeling, you know.
yeah,
And we got to the end of that series, having loved it, having had a really good response, and thought, how do we make this bigger? How do we make this more? So that's where it evolved from.
oh, excellent. I love the idea of the two different mediums together, like because people want to connect with people So if you've got the podcast in alongside it, that sounds super.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
And then
Philippa. This has
obviously all
been
the public speaking and
blast.
all of that kind of stuff that goes with
Yeah.
that. So, which is how we met.
We'll get you back.
Yeah.
Maybe with a bob cut again.
Maybe in lockdown I did a
Yeah, why
did
not?
do long bob in lockdown with those bag
Oh, really?
clippers. You know those bag clippers?
Oh, the flat ones. Yeah.
Yeah, the long ones. So I basically bag clipped my hair because it was a straight. That was
It works really well, actually. Yeah. Better than most. I mean, you ever see the videos of people's lockdown haircuts? I think we just buzz cut everyone in the house. Thankfully, I had my hair cut short right before. It was like the December before, so saved by that one at least. It's been an absolute joy, Philippa, and an education, as I would have expected to.
Good one, thank you.
Looking forward to hearing about the million choices when it comes out then too. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It was fun.